James, thanks for joining me today. Unfortunately, we aren't heading to Charlotte this weekend if this timestamps when we're connecting, but I'm so glad that we can chat. Little silver lining on that. Excited to tell your SMU story for those who don't know you. But as we always kick it off, please introduce yourself to our audience.
Yeah, thanks, Mitch. Real honor to be here. Very much appreciate everything that 1911 group does. It's an incredible resource for anybody who's looking to become more involved in the SMU community, and just so proud and grateful for your leadership in launching an initiative like that. So just first wanted to say thanks to the 1911 group. I'm James Lannon Jr., Chief Revenue Officer and Texas Market President for Security National Bank. SMU grad, proud grad of the prestigious 2010 class with Mitch, and just honored to be a Mustang.
You kind of hit on a couple of things there. We talked before, a couple of themes we want to go over, and no one better to do that with you, with giving back to SMU with time and energy, getting involved in the school. You and I 15 years out, and how that looks over the course of a career, but then also the banking industry, right? We want to kind of get into what leadership looks like, what the banking industry looks like, and career advice. But before we kind of touch into those pieces, I want to talk about the Landon and the SMU origin story. So those who are friends with you know you've got family members who went there, cousins, brothers. But tell us a little bit how it all started. How did everyone end up finding their way to SMU? Why did SMU become such an impactful place for the Landon family?
Yeah, it all started with my parents. They graduated in 1982, the Pony Express days, as all know. And both of their two younger siblings ended up going to SMU. All of them found or met, their spouses either in Dallas or right after school. And then since then, we think we're now at 25 family members who have
Wow.
graduated from SMU in some form or fashion since 1982.
So is there one or two things that you can think to that pulled you guys or your parents from, is the majority's from Nebraska, right? That's the kind of the family's home base, maybe some other, but from the Midwest, how did they hear about SMU? What was the draw that kind of then kept the pipeline strong?
Yeah, my dad was looking at a number of different, institutions, some down in Florida, some in Texas. I think he decided he was ready to leave the cold winters and find a little more warmth somewhere. So he ended up in Dallas and was really the first of, our family on the Landon side to come to SMU. And then my mother's from South Arkansas, and she was actually an early decision to Vanderbilt, and had a opportunity to come to SMU and decided to make that change. And thankfully she did. Otherwise I wouldn't be here. So, they just both went there and had such a wonderful experience. Their siblings had a wonderful experience, and a handful of cousins and other family members who ended up going to SMU. And then I was the first in our generation to go to SMU, and don't know the exact number, but let's call it 15 in my generation that have had a degree of some sort from SMU. And so we
That
keep
is
coming back
incredible.
because, the Landons aren't as smart as the Browns. And because we've sent so many family members to SMU, I think they feel compelled to let us in, and know we
Yeah.
pretty much almost always pay full tuition.
That's amazing. And which is, you guys are, those who know you guys have deep roots to Nebraska. And I'm sure, was there any pressures to go to those local schools within the family, or was it always kind of like, hey, everyone grew up an SMU fan and that's the one approved place to get out of the state?
Yeah. I went to a private school in Nebraska, and, had decided that I wanted to leave the state to go, pursue the next level of education. Looked at a
Uh-huh.
handful of schools, Vanderbilt, Wake Forest, St. Louis University, which is a popular spot for those who grew up in Omaha. And then there's a school west of SMU that also unfortunately was pretty popular
Mhm.
landing spot when I was looking at schools. So I was really between Wake Forest and SMU.
Mhm.
Visited both universities, loved both of them, felt very at home uh, on those campuses, and was fortunate enough to receive a few merit scholarships to
Mhm.
SMU, and then had some family that lived here, and I think that was comforting. I was one of five in our class at SMU that was from Nebraska, so
Oh,
pretty
cool.
small group that that came to SMU.
Mhm. And then you select SMU. I've always been interested in kind of families that have, those family operations, family businesses. Do you go into school thinking like, "Hey, this is a route. This is the only route. I need to study for this," or for you and eventually your brothers that follow, do you guys have kind of a free landscape of, "Hey, study what you want to study," and then touch on kind of where your interest lied uh, outside of Barley House and Milo's when you went to SMU?
Yeah, free landscape. Really, our uh, charge or task from our parents was, do well academically and stay out of trouble, but
Mhm.
pursue your passions and interests and, pursue them vigorously. And so
Mhm.
I knew I was pretty interested in going the business school route if I was fortunate enough to get in, which
Mhm.
I just barely got in. So I'm fortunate that that happened, and really had a great experience. And a lot of those classes, the early accounting finance classes, took a management of financial institutions class, which really further piqued my interest in the banking business more
Mm.
specifically, and kind of sent me down, a track of wanting to pursue a banking career full time.
That's awesome. So you knew a couple years in, hey, banking might be a good fit. I don't know where that is in the banking world, but I do have that interest. It is in the blood. So what did you do from there? You knew, did you want to go work at a couple big banks? How did you kind of perceive your career? Because I think, you know, maybe not differently, but differently than some is maybe you have something in the distance that hey, I might work for the family business one day, and maybe not. Maybe I want to go do my own thing in the banking world. How did you start to kind of put together this roadmap of a career in banking now that you knew this was something you wanted to pursue?
Yeah, well, interestingly enough, I was the oldest grandson on both sides, oldest great grandson on both sides. Was heavily encouraged uh, by grandparents, others that I admired, to actually pursue law school.
Mm.
So I looked pretty hard at pursuing law school, took the LSAT, applied to a few law schools. And
Wow.
then second semester was when I was taking that management of financial institutions class, second semester, senior year at SMU. And the light bulb just really went off for me that my passion lied a lot more in the banking industry. And although I understood the value of going and getting a law degree and how that could help me potentially in a banking career down the road,
Mhm.
I just felt like my heart was more in the banking industry. Um, Obviously, we have deep ties to the business and the space, and being the oldest son and a proud independent, I decided to go out and kind of quietly look for job opportunities on my own. And I was fortunate enough to receive an offer from Bank of America and a management training program that they had, actually based around their corporate audit program. So I
Mhm.
decided to, pursue that route and leave the law school track behind. And that was a really great decision for me. I think it's important for everybody to, have advisors and look to seek advice from
Mhm.
others, but it's really important too to just follow your passions. And, I think when people's passion aligns with what they're doing professionally, generally they enjoy it more, and generally they have more success because they're really motivated, to find success in that passion. And so, it was a great first job for me.
Yeah, and maybe this is a good time to kind of pause and touch on kind of that career advice, right? Maybe you had a little bit more insight into the different parts of banking than most, just kind of seeing it firsthand growing up. But we talked before, banking is such a broad career, right? There's so many roles. How maybe for those juniors, seniors, maybe pivoting into the field of banking, how should, and again, this could go on forever, but maybe high level, how should they think about the world of banking? Large corporate versus independent, and then the roles within, um, as all separately careers within themselves that they could pursue, right? How would you kind of frame that in the current landscape of banking today and potentially entrance into those careers?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I think there's a variety of great answers there. I think two things are really important for young people. Either you go into a very large enterprise and you commit to being a sponge and just working really hard and putting your head down and learning as much as you can. Um, in those early days, and or, finding somebody that you really admire that you think's a great leader, gonna invest, in your future, and wants to help kind of teach you how to be successful in the industry. I think those are two very different pathways. I feel like I was fortunate enough to work for big bank, community bank that became more of a regional financial institution, and then we're more of a regional financial institution today at Security National Bank, but we were very much a community bank. You know,
Mm,
the whole time I was growing up, and so. Um, I think there's a variety of pathways you can go, but I think ultimately you want to go work somewhere where you can really learn and ultimately get in a position where you can thrive. I think the best job for anybody coming out of school, if you really want to learn about the banking industry or you
mhm,
really want to learn about business, is to go be a credit analyst. I
mm,
mean, you're effectively getting paid to get an MBA and, learning how to run businesses, how businesses are run on a day-to-day basis. How do you finance, support, advise people's dreams professionally, and play a role in that. So when you're an underwriter and analyst, I mean, you're working very closely with the numbers. You get to oftentimes tell the story about
mm.
how a company got to where they are, or who the CEO is, or who the president is, or what's the connection between the bank and the business. And I just think it's a really wonderful way um, to learn about business and banking in general while typically getting paid.
I love, yeah, that's great advice. And as much as I'm sure, I've no doubt you would have been a great lawyer, I'm glad you stayed in the banking world. I think your ability to connect with people and your personality and interest in people, I think probably ties into what makes you a good banker and a good leader. And we'll kind of talk about what leadership looks like today. Um, so you kind of were able to start at Bank of America, 4.5 years there, Veritex 4.5 years. Touch on kind of those experiences, what you learned, and kind of what you were putting in your notepad for, how you wanted to progress your career, and then potentially, if you were to kind of develop and grow Security National personally as a role that you might have down the road.
Yeah. Well, first off, I'll back up a little bit, Mitch, because I had a handful of internships when I was finishing high school and in college, and I think those really helped formulate my interest in the banking business too. All of those were at Security National Bank until my last one, which was actually at Bank of Texas. But
Mm,
uh, my grandfather established our bank in 1964, and the world's a little different, by the way. I'll disclose that today. But his rule was that any grandsons that were interested in coming to work at our bank, their first job at the bank had to be in our maintenance department. And
mm,
so I spent um, my first summer at the bank working in our maintenance department, and I was terrible at that job. and that was a really great experience for me because it motivated me to get
Yeah.
back to SMU and really study and work hard. And then I was
Right.
fortunate enough to work in our wealth and trust department for a summer, and then I worked in our banking division for a summer. And then my senior year, second semester, I was fortunate enough to intern at Bank of Texas for 20 hours a
Cool.
week. 8 a.m. Friday work is definitely not for everybody. Second semester, senior year at SMU,
There we
but
go.
I was fortunate enough to, have had an opportunity to go work there. Our families had a longstanding relationship with Norm Bagwell, who's one of the
Mhm.
real Mount Rushmore bankers in Dallas,
Yeah.
and just I felt like the opportunity to um, just be a sponge in their institution and learn anything I could in those 20 hours a week. Second semester was really going to help, fortify and shape my interest in banking.
Yeah.
And it really did. So, back to your original question, Bank of America, um, totally different experience than, I kind of grew up around in the banking
Mhm.
industry and I was used to. You walk into Bank of America's, headquarter office in Dallas at that time, and it's obviously the tallest building in town, and your neck hurts trying to look all the way up
Right.
at the top. So that was a unique experience for a Nebraska boy. Um, our management training program had really talented individuals in it. And, 2010, as you remember well, was a really tough time, to find an opportunity. So there were multiple Ivy League, really prominent,
Oh.
institutions that, new hires were starting from. So it was, relatively cutthroat,
Mhm.
with a lot of high achievers expecting to, climb up the ranks quick. And
Mm.
the way it was set up really in Dallas was you were effectively a remote worker, which I think is tough for anybody, but particularly when you're young. Um, Ended up being a really great experience for me. I probably had 12 or 13 managers in the time I was there, most
Wow.
of which were not local. So I had to really learn how to work hard enough to be able to stand out or be known, even though I wasn't sitting next to my boss every day.
Mm.
Got to travel quite a bit too, which I think was a really great experience for me. Got to go out to the headquarter office quite a bit. Travel outside the country for work. We were constantly put on different jobs or engagements in a variety of areas. And Bank of America had just acquired uh, Merrill Lynch, had
Mm.
just acquired uh, Countrywide, so it was a really good time to be, a new hire there and in a
Mhm.
group like the audit department because yeah, I effectively got to rotate through all those areas and really see the good, bad, and the ugly. So it was a great experience. Really grateful for Bank of America and the opportunity I had there. Met a lot of really wonderful people. And the bank changed considerably in those 4.5 years I was there. We went from a headcount of about 295,000 teammates to about 230,000 teammates in that span. And so that was a unique experience too. I don't know that I um, was prepared for just kind of the intense corporate culture that came with it.
Right.
It was
Right.
good to learn how to compete in that environment, and I'd encourage, any young person to, pursue that because it's a great career experience.
Mhm.
And I was fortunate also early in my career to be able to spend 4.5 years in the audit risk compliance credit areas. I think that training really fundamental to the position I'm in now and, my ability to be successful on the sales oriented side, but also understand the back end functions that are critically important to the success of a bank.
Right. And then what led was that kind of you knew you'd done your time and you were ready to kind of see it from a different lens, or what was the Veritex opportunity?
Yeah. Well, I had um, additional opportunities I was interested in at Bank of America, but the thing I was realizing was a majority of those opportunities were more on the East Coast.
Mm.
and the ones that were going to be client facing, which was becoming a bigger interest of mine at that point in my career, were going to be pretty transactional in nature and not as relational. It was going to take a while to really get in a position to where, um, I could really uh, go out and build relationships and be more of a relational banker, which was kind of what I was
Mhm.
used to and grew up around and really interested in. So I just made the determination that if that was something that I wanted to pursue, I needed to find a place that that would allow me to do so. So enter Veritex and Malcolm Holland, really wonderful story, and want to share it with this group because I think for any leaders or people aspiring to make a difference or, how do opportunities create themselves? I was fortunate enough to meet Malcolm actually at the U.S. Senior Open in Omaha in the summer of 2012. He was serving on the USGA Executive Committee, had ironically graduated with my parents same year at SMU,
Mhm.
was walking around the course, ran into him, stuck my hand out, told him what I was doing. He said, if you ever want to learn more about banking, you're welcome to come meet with me. So
Wow.
it was around the 4th of July that year. I spent, a week or so with my family and then got back to Dallas and sent him a note. He graciously invited me over to his office. He gave me about a list of 30 things he would do if he was a young aspiring banker and wanted to learn more
Oh,
about the
wow.
industry. And fast forward 2 years later, Veritex was in the process of filing to go public. And I had actually had a few other uh, great job opportunities that I was contemplating,
Mhm.
and effectively in that 2 years had crossed off about 75% of the list that Malcolm had encouraged me to go learn about and
Yeah.
pursue. And so I reached out to him because I was looking for some advice on which one of these jobs I should pursue.
Mhm.
And when we sat down, I showed him the notebook that of all the meetings I had taken, all the research I had
Mhm.
done, just as a form of gratitude from what he had offered to me two
Mhm.
years ago. Turns out, I think he was pretty impressed and surprised by that. What ended up happening was Veritex kind of created an opportunity for me to be a banker over there. It was
Wow.
the least guaranteed anything from
Mhm.
a compensation standpoint. But I would have rubbed two pennies together at that point to go work for Malcolm.
Yeah.
I was just so inspired by what he was doing in 2011 and 2012
Mhm.
compared to what was happening in the rest of the banking industry, which was
Mm.
a lot of banks were selling, things were getting tougher. Malcolm and Veritex were very much more on the offense. They had raised capital. They were going out and buying smaller community banks, trying to aggregate them into a bank. They had a
Mm.
really talented sales team. And, you know, I, I, I just believe that if I came in and worked hard, Malcolm was going to give me a fair shot, to go out and be a banker and,
Mhm.
feast or famine on my abilities to do that. About 9 months after I got to the bank, I walked into our headquarter office one day and, was told I'm starting next week at one of our locations as a banker. And I remember um, walking into that office the first day and sitting down in my chair, no customers to my name and
Yeah.
saying, what do I do now? Um, I'd spent my whole life
Wow.
around this business, really watching my dad and my grandfather and my uncle, and many, of the
Mhm.
Security National Bank bankers who I was close to build and formulate strong relationships. But actually sitting in that seat and having to go out and, and prove yourself,
Yeah.
really had to spend some time kind of thinking about the strategy. And what I did was, I just went and started meeting with people that I admired, that I thought had banking needs, or were centers of influence that might know people who had banking
Mhm.
needs, and put a lot of time in outside of 8 to 5 to
Yeah.
develop those relationships. I mean, breakfast, lunch, dinner, happy hours, different engagements, really leaning into the SMU network. I
I
mean,
was about to say,
I
this is
knew,
probably a good point to mention that you were one of the people I knew from day one from graduation that stayed connected with the school as much as you could, right? You're busy, but connecting with friends and keeping that network, maybe it was unintentional, but the impact that had of staying involved, going to games, going to events, it turns out now when you needed it, it was there for you.
yeah, and it really was unintentional. I mean, it was following personal passions,
Mhm.
and I chose uh, early on after I graduated from SMU that I wanted to stay connected and close to it because I was proud of being an SMU graduate and I was grateful for the opportunities and the friendships and the education that SMU provided to me. I'd say one of the most important things I determined about 3 to 4 years out of school was I remember spending some time with my mother, and a few other people I admired just talking about, how do I get involved in SMU and what am I passionate about and how do I tie those two things together? I knew I wanted to find area that I could get involved with, but that, I could really invest in. I didn't want to be overly involved. I wanted to pick a specific area that I felt like could use some impact and particularly young alumni impact.
Mhm.
And that's when I got connected with the athletic department, and Matt Peters was a new hire at that time in the athletic department. The Mustang Club didn't have uh, really any tie to the young alumni at that
Mhm.
point. So I was asked to join the board about a year after I started having those discussions, and was the youngest member on the Mustang Club by probably about 10 years when I started. And I'll tell you, really, I was so passionate about athletics at that time because I felt like if SMU could continue to rise athletically, that ultimately would help the value of the degree
Mhm.
and become an institution that, future generations of Brown Landons and other
Yeah.
SMU grads would want to send their kids to. And so, fast forward a decade later, really incredible to see SMU in the Atlantic Coast Conference with so many prestigious,
Incredible.
academic institutions, and competing at the highest level athletically. I just really went all in on that effort. Have had the privilege to run the Mustang Club board for a few years, and very indirectly, that heavy involvement with SMU throughout the course of my professional career opened up a lot of doors for opportunities to, help people professionally. And
Yeah.
so it ended up being very indirectly one of the, greatest choices in my professional career to get involved with SMU at a really high level.
Yeah, I think that's you stated that the right way in that it was your, you know, interest in helping the school and getting involved that then piggybacked into success. And from what I'm hearing, right, and kind of knowing you, I mean, you had every career option to work corporately, stay at Veritex, have an amazing career. Let's fast forward a little bit to what led you to the now this position in opening Security National in Dallas, and maybe first by starting and telling us a little bit about who Security National is when it was founded, what it is today, and then the story of why you said, "Hey, I think it's time to bring this to the Texas, the Dallas market."
Yeah. Well, just to kind of wrap up the Veritex piece, Malcolm was a big believer in the scoreboard and performance, and that was a really great fit for me. Um, we had a sales culture there where if you weren't performing at a high level, your peers who are also bankers weren't really giving you the time of day, especially if you didn't have any gray hairs and looked like you could barely shave. So I learned a lot about work ethic and how to be effective there. And Malcolm, very true to his word, gave opportunities to people regardless of experience. if they performed at a high level and treated people right. And so, because of that, I was able to have a lot of success at Veritex and be exposed to a lot. And, that really led to the opportunity we have today. We're a third generation family owned and operated bank, started in 1964, as I mentioned, by my grandfather. Um, my dad ran the bank day to day for about 30 years, closely with my uncle. Today, I'm our Texas market president and our chief revenue officer, and my cousins are chief operating officer and our Nebraska market president. The reality is, for that decade, I was out working in the banking industry. About every day, my dad was asking me when I was going to come home.
Mhm.
And uh, I was enjoying Veritex so much. I really loved what we were doing. I believed wholeheartedly in what we were doing. And there just became a point for me to where, I think my ultimate goal was to always go work for our family business, but
Mhm.
we didn't have a location um, in Dallas, and I was, not interested in moving. Our family obviously
Mhm.
has a lot of connectivity to the Dallas market. I'd say today we have just as many shareholders, that live or domicile in Dallas as we do in Omaha.
Mhm.
We've just never pursued anything professionally. And so our bank board decided, in kind of early 2019, that they wanted to enter into the Des Moines market and into the Dallas market more formally. I was asked by our board at that time if running our Dallas operation was something I was interested in. Obviously, I was. I had enough respect for my existing employer that I didn't sign anything, even though it was with our family, before I went and sat down with
Mhm.
my bosses and leaders at Veritex, including Malcolm, and explained to them, why I thought this was a good decision for me.
Mhm.
Um, and even still, leaving Veritex that very last day was super hard.
I'm
I mean, I
sure.
had tears in my eyes. I was super proud about what we were doing, and I was excited about the future. I knew this was the right decision for me, but really, our bank's interest in coming down to this market was all the banks that looked like ours that were privately held, had no intent to sell, had spent a lot of time thinking about succession planning in the future. Those institutions were starting to get bought in the Dallas market at a
Mhm.
pretty aggressive rate. And if you look at what's happened today, you can count on a couple hands, the private financial institutions down here that kind of really have a long term plan. And that's
Mhm.
not a negative on any of those banks that have
Right.
decided to sell or merge. There's good rationale for that. But we felt like there was a real opportunity for us to come into this market and provide a service in more of the community and relational banking world that was becoming more and more underserved as more of these large corporate financial institutions were coming into the market. So we're a nationally chartered bank, and if you're in great standing with your regulator, uh, expanding across state lines is just like opening up a branch if you're a state chartered bank. Most banks are state chartered because there's generally a little less regulatory burden, and
Mhm.
it's not as costly. My grandfather decided 60 years ago that he wanted us to be regulated by the toughest governing body
Mm.
because he thought that would help our bank become most successful over the long term. And, maybe unbeknownst to him, or maybe he had some idea,
Mhm.
it's really allowed us to effectively scale into uh, two new locations in Iowa and Texas.
That's amazing. So, pushing 6, 7 years later, how has the growth been? I don't wanna steal all day. I know we can talk about this in length. What have been some of your greatest achievements, I guess, in that first decision to open and the opening to today with Security National, and specifically the Dallas, piece?
Yeah, well, I spent about 9 months sitting in a 136 square foot glass office at Spaces um, off McKinney Avenue, which
Mhm.
unfortunately went under and now has a a new name over there. So that was really a humbling experience, to go from, overseeing a large market for
Right.
a great local name to sitting in an office, trying to figure out how to get started again. And,
Seriously.
fortunate enough to, um, have a few early customers that entrusted in us to do business before we even had our doors open. I was,
Wow.
had the ability to be a marketing officer. We have a dynamic wealth and trust group and banking group that's, up in Nebraska. So we had the ability to kind of take care of customers' needs and, in an
Mhm.
appropriate fashion until we opened our doors up. About the time we put our initial team together was right around COVID. And so one of the things that really helped get the bank going was, when PPP loans
Mm.
uh, were all the talk for a few
Yeah.
months. We were fortunate enough to understand that process at a high level really early, and we just worked our tails off. Really, really, I tell you honestly, to just be as great of Americans as we could be in that
Mhm.
period of time, because that was a real test, I think,
Absolutely.
for our industry on how willing our industry was to help people when they really
Yeah.
needed it. But I would tell you, most of our team worked 14 to 18-hour days for about 2 months, and we
Wow.
tried to process as many PPP loans as we could to help as many people as we could. And what ended up happening was about 60% of those loans we processed ended up becoming core customers of the bank. So
That's
either loan
amazing.
relationship with us, wealth of trust relationship with us, multitude of bank accounts, credit cards, treasury relationships, and that kind of, really dominoed for us in the market and allowed us to get off to the right start.
That's incredible. Yeah, I didn't think of the catalyst that that might have, and just organic relationship building with that you can't kind of speed up in that route. Let's talk a little bit as we close down, kind of how people within the Dallas community, the SMU community, the 1911 community can think about um, why and how they can use Security National. I know, Lindsay and I use you guys in a few different things, and the process and the experience has been amazing. I know a lot of our friends, whether it's business related, personal related, they can't speak highly enough of their ability to use Security National. How should we think of you guys as a resource for freshly out of college to the seasoned professional, the business owner, and all in between, to work with you all?
Yeah, so quick background, we're about 1.8 billion in bank assets, about 2.7 billion in assets under management, our wealth and trust base. That right there makes us really unique. There aren't a lot of banks that also have the ability to help people on the private side. Um, so we can pretty much handle, any commercial lending need up to 20 or 25 million on the
Mm,
borrowing side is generally where we like to, stay inside of. And then, we can help the owner or the private banking customer, with all their needs all the way through the wealth and trust side outside of about the investment banking work. So that really makes us pretty dynamic because we can help somebody from start to finish. We do a lot of family planning, a lot of generational work. We work with a lot of family owned businesses. We help a lot of families, as you alluded to, just in terms of how they think about the future, their needs. And the one thing that we really pride ourselves on, which I think is incredibly important, is confidentiality. We don't spend any time talking about who we do business with. That's actually a kind of an unbreakable rule around here.
mhm.
But we hope that we do a good enough job for customers and people that they'll tell others to call and reach out to us. And so we just focus on executing for every single individual customer, doing all we can for them. When we're investing back into the bank, whether it's via technology or our people, capabilities, products, all we're thinking about is what else can we be doing to provide another service that's going to be value add for our customers? How do we get our technology to the point to where, you know, it's competitive enough to compete with, the largest financial service institutions in the world? So, we spend a lot of time just working tirelessly to provide an A level experience for, each existing customer and each new customer. And really, the way we've been able to scale and grow in this market is through talent. I represent that over a 3 or 4 year span for our, 5 lead directors in this market, which we have 30 team members, 5 other directors who all fill critical roles for us down here. I probably met with over 200 bankers or financial service experts in that period of time, and finding people that are culturally a good fit, character wise a good fit, and then also have the talent and skill set and willpower to want to be entrepreneurial and help build something and really uh, take care of people is a tough thing to find. The two commonalities that um, my dad, who's our executive chairman today, and I used to fly him down, or he'd fly down for a
Hmm.
couple days a month when we were getting ready to launch the bank, and uh, I'd just wear them out. I mean, we'd go meet with 15 to 20 people over those 2
Mm,
days, and we'd ask a lot of them the same questions. What do you like about your financial service provider? What do you like about your bank? What do you think they could be better at? The two consistent things we heard from people that they wanted to see more of in our industry and within the city of Dallas was continuity. Didn't want to see turnover in their banker or the people they're
mhm,
working with.
mhm,
And then what we kind of defined as absentee ownership. So, I used to have a really great relationship with the president. That's where my relationship started. I don't see him or her anymore.
mhm.
So we've really tried to fundamentally and foundationally focus on those things and build a
Wow.
team that understands the importance of that. Um, so that's been really fundamental to kind of our growth and success. But we have 30 team members down here. We have, a couple hundred clients. We passed, 500 million in loan fundings down here a couple months ago. Just feel really privileged and fortunate to have the ability to work with so many great people. And honestly, our whole team loves what we do. We love what we do because we get to help people every day, and this is the best way we feel like we know how. So, there's a lot of great banking options out there. I think it's hard to find, you know, banks and financial service companies that really take a lot of pride in being advisors and
Mhm.
doing the right thing for the customers at all times. And we walk in every day, and that's what we focus on is those who want to do business with us. We want to help them in any way we can, and we're ruthlessly focused on that.
Yeah, no, James, thank you for making the time. I think you're a epitome of the living the way you speak, right? You walk the talk. You're always there for people. You're so gracious with your time. I know how busy you are, and you have family. So, Mustang Nation is lucky to have you. Dallas is lucky to have Security National Bank, and really appreciate you always giving back so much of your time to this 1911 group and the alumni. So thank you, and looking forward to touching base kind of more regularly as we can go deeper on some banking themes and watch as you guys grow. I know there's a few things on leadership we didn't get to, but we have you as a resource. The community has you as a resource. Reach out to James and the team if there's anything they can do to help. And thanks again for making time to speak today.
Yeah, we'd love to. Thank you, Mitch. Go Ponies.
Go Ponies.
Thank you to our sponsors, Sewell Buick GMC, Agility Holdings Group, Probity Advisors, Sound of a Rose, Hilltop Property Tax, Security National Bank of Texas, Boyd, Shackelford, Barnett, and Dixon, Bigham Agency, Life After Ball, SMU Cox School of Business, and Mignon Steakhouse.